The scent of expensive coffee and rain-slicked Chicago pavement filled our penthouse. It was the smell of every other Saturday, but today the air was thick with unspoken words. Chloe stood across the marble island, her knuckles white around her favorite ceramic mug. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mark," she finally whispered, her voice cracking. I have to tell you something. I messed up." I took a slow sip of my own coffee, letting the silence stretch. My heart wasn't pounding. My hands were steady. In my line of work at Sterling Ridge Investments, you learn that emotion is a liability. "You mean the one-night stand from 6 weeks ago?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. I slid a single crisp bank statement across the island. Or the fact that our joint account now has a balance of exactly 0? Chloe's face, which I once considered the most beautiful thing in Chicago, crumpled. The curated mask of tearful confession shattered, replaced by raw, ugly shock. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, snatching the statement from the marble. "I'm Mark Caldwell. At 46, I don't manage multi-million-dollar portfolios at Sterling Ridge Investments by succumbing to panic. I manage risk. I assess threats. I analyze data. And I make decisive moves to protect capital. For 15 years, Chloe was my partner, my most significant personal investment. But 6 weeks ago, she became a liability, a bad stock-bleeding value. And I do what I always do with a failing asset. I liquidate before it bankrupts the entire portfolio. While she was wrestling with her guilt, I was executing a plan. The late nights she thought I was closing deals, I was on the phone with my private banker. I was quietly transferring every liquid asset, the savings, the brokerage funds, the cash reserves for our planned villa in Tuscany. Every dollar we had built together, I had secured. My strategy built that wealth. Her betrayal just changed the beneficiary. You can't do this," she stammered, her voice a thin, reedy sound I barely recognized. "That money is half mine. We built that together." Her shock was curdling into fury, a predictable emotional pivot. "Correction," I said, leaning against the counter. "I built it. You were the primary beneficiary. There's a difference." My tone was level, the same one I used with junior analysts who let emotion cloud their judgment. "You want to know how I knew? It wasn't a private investigator. It wasn't a suspicious friend. It was you, Chloe. It was a single data point you were too careless to hide." I let that hang in the air. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an explanation, for an escape. 6 weeks ago, a Tuesday. I continued. "You said you were staying at Sarah's place after a late dinner. But the Uber receipt told a different story. An email confirmation sent to our shared account at 2:17 a.m. You never checked that address. I manage it. The destination wasn't Sarah's apartment in Lincoln Park. It was the Viceroy, a hotel." Her face went pale. It was the look of an amateur caught in a lie, a rookie trader who bet the farm on a bad tip and lost. "One anomaly isn't a pattern," I explained, almost academically. "But it demands investigation." So I looked deeper. "You made a cash withdrawal earlier that night, $400. Uncharacteristic. You never carry that much cash. You use the card for the points. But you wouldn't want a credit card statement showing a bar tab from the hotel lounge, would you? For 15 years, our life was a meticulously managed portfolio. We were the blue-chip stock, steady and reliable, compounding year after year. Our shared goals, the business, the travel, the retirement, were our dividends. I poured everything into it. I saw us as a merger, a consolidation of assets for mutual, long-term growth. But that night, you introduced a fatal risk. You weren't my partner anymore. You were a systemic threat, a bad investment hidden inside a good one, a ticking time bomb on the balance sheet. So I did what any good fund manager would do. I didn't get angry, I didn't scream, I isolated the threat and protected the capital. While you were struggling with your guilt, deciding how to phrase your confession, I was reallocating our entire net worth into a new, single-signature trust. A trust that bears only one name, Mark Caldwell. You didn't just have a one-night stand, Chloe. You triggered a market crash you never saw coming." Chloe's face hardened, the tears drying into streaks of war paint. Fury gave her a new, rigid spine. "You think you can just steal our life's work? I'm getting a lawyer, Mark. The best one in Chicago. They will rip you apart. The courts will laugh you out of the building. This is illegal." I almost smiled. The predictable escalation. The empty threat from a position of weakness. "Please, get a lawyer," I said, my voice soft. "They'll need to bill you for their time, of course. You'll have to figure out how to pay their retainer." I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The sky was a bruised purple, the lights of the loop just beginning to glitter. "You're operating under a flawed assumption, Chloe. You think our money was sitting in a simple joint account like a college couple saving for a couch. That would have been financially amateurish." I turned back to face her. "For the last 8 years, our assets, my bonuses, your salary, the capital gains from the portfolio, haven't gone into a bank. They've been funneled into a corporate structure, the Sterling Caldwell Family Trust. I set it up for tax efficiency and asset protection. You called the paperwork a bore." Her eyes widened slightly. I could see the memory flickering behind them. A thick stack of documents on this very island, a pen in my hand, a breezy "just sign here, babe," as she was rushing out to a yoga class. "You should have read it," I continued, my voice as flat as a trading screen after hours. "Specifically, Article 4, Section 3B. It's a standard clause in partnership agreements. It's called a fiduciary duty clause." I paused, letting the term land. It was the language of my world, not hers. It grants the managing trustee, that's me, the authority to unilaterally dissolve the partnership and reallocate all assets in the event of let's call it a behavioral breach, an action by one partner that introduces catastrophic risk to the entity's stability. I saw the gears turning, the slow, dawning horror. She was finally understanding the architecture of the cage she was in. "Your affair wasn't just a personal betrayal," I explained. "It was a business error. You chose a man, a junior marketing coordinator from your company, James Ritter, 28 years old, lives in a Wrigleyville walk-up, drives a leased Jetta. I know, because I ran a background check the morning after I saw the Uber receipt. It took me 90 minutes and cost less than your bar tab at the Viceroy." The mention of his name was a physical blow. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "Sleeping with a subordinate, Chloe? That's not just infidelity. That's a potential HR nightmare, a lawsuit waiting to happen. It's reckless. It demonstrates a profound lack of judgment, the same judgment you'd be using with our money, our investments, our future." I picked up the now useless bank statement and tore it neatly in half. This wasn't an act of passion. It wasn't a crime of jealousy. This was a risk mitigation strategy. You became a volatile, unpredictable asset, and my job, my only real job, is to protect the portfolio from exactly that kind of risk. You didn't just cheat on a husband. You violated a contract, and I just executed it. Chloe didn't collapse. She didn't scream or throw the ceramic mug that was still clutched in her hand. The fury in her eyes didn't vanish. It simply cooled, condensing into something harder, more potent. Like ice. She placed the mug on the counter with a quiet, deliberate click that seemed louder than any shout would have been. "You're right," she said, her voice unnervingly steady. "I should have read it." She looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time since this began. There was no fear in her eyes anymore, only a profound, chilling clarity. "I was a fool, not for the affair. That was a symptom, a stupid, desperate symptom. I was a fool for ever believing this was a partnership." She took a step towards me, her posture erect. "This wasn't about risk mitigation, Mark. This is who you are. Every dinner, every vacation, every 'I love you' was just another transaction on your personal ledger, wasn't it? You were just waiting for a reason, any reason, to declare my shares worthless and enact a hostile takeover. The accusation was precise. It was a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. She was using my own language against me. A hostile takeover implies the target has value. I countered, keeping my own voice flat. You made yourself a liability. No, she said, a bitter smile touching her lips. I just gave you the exit clause you'd been looking for. You don't love things, Mark. You acquire them, you manage them. And when they no longer serve your portfolio's growth, you liquidate. You didn't just find a data point. You were searching for it. You wanted me to fail. I felt a flicker of something unexpected. Not guilt, but a grudging respect. The terrified woman from 10 minutes ago was gone, replaced by an opponent who had finally understood the rules of the game far too late. She wasn't just reacting to the loss of money. She was mourning the loss of an illusion she had built around me. Your motivations are irrelevant, I stated. The outcome is the same. Is it? She asked, her voice dropping to a near whisper. You have the money. You have the penthouse. You have your perfectly balanced, solitary portfolio. You've successfully protected your capital, Mark. But what exactly is left that's worth protecting? Her question hung in the vast, silent space between us. What exactly is left that's worth protecting? It was a good question. An analyst who asked that in a board meeting would get a nod of respect before being methodically dismantled. She was trying to reframe the debate, to shift the valuation from the tangible to the emotional, a classic tactic of a party with no leverage. What's left is the principle, I answered, my voice echoing slightly in the sudden quiet. The core asset, unburdened. The entire portfolio, free of a volatile component that threatened to collapse the whole structure. That was always the objective, Chloe. To protect the fund's integrity. You're confusing the packaging with the contents. Her bitter smile remained. I was never packaging, Mark. I was a partner. You're the one who only ever saw a box. I walked to the bar and poured a glass of water, the ice clinking against the crystal. The sound was sharp, definitive. The semantics are irrelevant now. This phase of the operation is complete. We're moving on to the next. I took a sip, my eyes meeting hers over the rim of the glass. You have 30 minutes to pack one suitcase, whatever you believe is essential, your personal effects. The last vestiges of her defiant posture faltered. It was one thing to philosophize about my soulless nature. It was another to be told you have 30 minutes to erase 15 years of your life. You're kicking me out? Now? It's not your name on the lease, Chloe. It hasn't been for 5 years, not since we refinanced and moved it under the trust's corporate holdings for tax purposes. You signed that paperwork too. I set the glass down. A car is waiting downstairs. It will take you to a hotel. Her eyes narrowed. Let me guess. The Viceroy? The jab was pathetic, an attempt to wound me with a memory that I had already logged, analyzed, and rendered inert. Don't be sentimental. The Viceroy is for clandestine encounters you can't afford. This is a business transaction. I've booked you a 1-week stay at the Hotel Felix. It's clean, efficient, and centrally located. I've also arranged for a new credit card to be delivered there tomorrow morning. It has a $5,000 balance. Consider it a severance payment. After that, your financial well-being will be your own responsibility. For a long moment, she didn't move. I expected an explosion, a plate to be thrown, a final, desperate plea. Instead, she gave a single, sharp nod. The fight was over. She was now simply executing the terms of her surrender. She turned and walked toward the master bedroom without another word. Her footsteps on the polished hardwood were the only sound. I followed, not out of concern but out of a need to supervise the liquidation process to its conclusion. I stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, as she opened the vast walk-in closet we had designed together. On her side, rows of designer dresses, shoes, and handbags hung like artifacts in a museum exhibit. Assets she could no longer access. She ignored them all. She pulled out a simple, black, rollaboard suitcase and laid it on the bed. Her movements were calm, deliberate. She didn't frantically grab at valuables. She packed practical things. A few pairs of jeans, sweaters, underwear. The kind of anonymous clothing you could wear anywhere. She went into the bathroom and took her toothbrush, her face cream, the basic necessities. It was the packing of a refugee, not a scorned socialite. Then she stopped. Her eyes scanned the room, the life we had built, now stripped down to its cold, transactional bones. She walked over to the nightstand on her side of the bed. Beside the lamp was a small silver frame. It didn't hold a picture of us. It held a faded photograph of her as a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, standing on a beach with a goofy, gap-toothed grin, holding a plastic pail and shovel. It was a picture of her with her father, who had passed away a decade ago. It was a worthless object. Its monetary value was 0. I hadn't even registered its existence in my mental inventory of the room. She picked it up, her thumb brushing across the glass. She didn't pack it. Instead, she opened the back, removed the photograph, and left the empty silver frame on the nightstand. She folded the small, worn picture carefully and slipped it into her jacket pocket. It was a silent, surgical strike. She wasn't taking an asset. She was repossessing a memory, leaving me with the hollow, decorative shell. 20 minutes later, she rolled the small suitcase into the living room. She had her coat on. Her face was pale, but composed. The storm had passed, leaving behind a hard, desolate peace. "The key card to this floor will be deactivated in 10 minutes, I said, my tone informational. "The doorman has been instructed not to grant you access. Your belongings will be placed in a storage unit. My lawyer will send you the details, should you wish to retrieve them." She walked to the door, not even glancing back at the panoramic view of the city, the art on the walls, or the life she was leaving. She paused with her hand on the handle. "You know, Mark," she said, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of a final verdict. "The most pathetic part of all this isn't that you did it. It's that you genuinely believe you've won." She opened the door and stepped out. The heavy door clicked shut behind her, the sound of a vault being sealed. I was alone. The penthouse was silent. The portfolio was secure. The risk had been neutralized. I looked at the marble island, the empty space where her mug had been. I surveyed my kingdom, a fortress of wealth and solitude. I had executed my strategy flawlessly. Every contingency was planned for, every asset protected. And for the first time, standing in the dead center of my victory, I felt the chilling, unfamiliar weight of an uncalculated loss. The silence of the penthouse over the next 48 hours was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum. I worked. I read market reports. I ate a perfectly cooked steak alone at my vast dining table. Each action was efficient, unburdened by the need for conversation or compromise. I had streamlined my life. I told myself this was the feeling of pure, unadulterated control. Victory. On Monday morning, I walked into the lobby of Sterling Ridge Investments feeling 10 feet tall. This was my arena, the place where my brand of cold, hard logic wasn't just accepted, it was revered. But the atmosphere was wrong. The usual hum of quiet ambition was replaced by a strained quiet. My assistant, a normally unflappable young woman, couldn't quite meet my eye as she handed me my morning espresso. "Mr. Sterling would like to see you," she said, her voice tight. Immediately. An immediate summons wasn't unusual. A crisis in the Asian markets, a sudden client demand. I felt the familiar thrum of a problem to be solved. I walked to the corner office, the one with the commanding view of Lake Michigan, and entered without knocking. Arthur Sterling, a man whose family had been managing Chicago's old money since the Great Fire, was not looking at the view. He was staring at a single sheet of paper on his antique mahogany desk. He didn't invite me to sit. "Mark," he began, his voice devoid of its usual warmth, "we have a situation." "I'm here to manage it, Arthur," I said, my confidence unshaken. He finally looked up, and his eyes were like chips of granite. This isn't a market fluctuation. This is about you." He slid the paper across the polished surface of the desk. This was sent from an anonymous email address at 7 a.m. Saturday morning. It went to me, to the entire board, and to the personal inboxes of our top 5 clients. I picked it up. It wasn't a rant. It was calm, articulate, and utterly devastating. It was styled as a cautionary tale regarding the fiduciary risks of employing senior managers with unchecked personal authority. It detailed, with chilling precision, the systematic dismantling of a 15-year partnership. It mentioned the secret trust, the unilateral transfer of assets, the 30-minute eviction. It even quoted me. It used my own words: a volatile asset, risk mitigation strategy, behavioral breach. My blood ran cold. Chloe, it had to be. But the narrative was masterfully skewed. There was one glaring, catastrophic omission. "This is a distortion," I said, my voice tight. "This is a domestic dispute, nothing more. She's leaving out the most critical piece of data, the catalyst for my actions." "The affair, you mean?" Sterling asked, his voice dangerously low. I was stunned into silence. "How did he know?" "She included it," Sterling said, his disappointment a palpable force in the room. "In a second, separate email, sent only to me. An apology. She explained her profound personal error and attached a copy of her letter of resignation from her marketing firm, effective immediately. She said she sent the first, anonymous email because she believed our clients had a right to understand the full spectrum of your decision-making process when under pressure." I felt the floor drop out from under me. This wasn't a desperate, emotional lashing out. This was a strategy, a brilliant, two-pronged attack. She had confessed her sins separately, painting herself as a flawed but accountable human being taking responsibility. Then she had anonymously laid my actions bare for the world to judge, stripped of that sympathetic context. She had isolated the variables. She had presented my flawlessly logical response as the unprovoked act of a sociopath. "She played you, Arthur." "Did she?" he countered, rising from his chair. "Or did she simply hold up a mirror?" "I've had 3 calls this morning, Mark, from clients who aren't concerned with your partner's infidelity. They're concerned with the man who manages their legacy, a man who would use a fiduciary duty clause to financially obliterate his partner of 15 years. A man who boasts about it as a pia hagbaz strategy. They see a lack of judgment, a lack of proportion. They see instability. They see a man who might one day decide their portfolio is a volatile asset he needs to liquidate for reasons only he understands." He walked to the window, his back to me. "You've spent your career building a reputation for unshakable stability. In one weekend, you've torched it. You've made yourself a liability." The word hit me like a physical blow. The exact term I had used for her. "Your access to the company's servers and trading platforms has been suspended," Sterling said, his voice final. "You're on indefinite administrative leave, pending a full board review. Go home, Mark." I stood there, holding a piece of paper that had just destroyed my life. I had viewed my world as a portfolio of assets. I thought I had protected the capital by cutting. "Go home, Mark." The words were a dismissal, not a suggestion. I walked out of Sterling's office, through a sea of averted eyes and sudden, intense interest in computer screens. The city I had commanded just this morning now felt like hostile territory. Back in the penthouse, the silence wasn't powerful anymore. It was suffocating. This wasn't a fortress. It was a mausoleum. I had played the game by my rules, the only rules I recognized. I assessed the threat, protected the capital, and liquidated the liability. But Chloe hadn't played my game. She'd flipped the entire board over, starting a new contest with rules I'd dismissed as irrelevant. Reputation, perception, humanity, assets you can't quantify or control. She hadn't tried to win a legal battle for the money. She knew that was my arena. Instead, she took my cold, hard logic and held it up to the world as a mirror. She framed her mistake as a human failing, one she took full accountability for. Then she framed my response as a monstrous calculation, a glimpse into the soul of a man who liquidates people. She hadn't fought me for the portfolio. She'd made me the liability within it. My phone buzzed on the Marble Island, a push notification from a major financial news outlet. The headline was surgically precise. Sterling Ridge senior partner placed on indefinite leave amid misconduct allegations. The story was out. The poison was spreading. I walked numbly into the bedroom, my gaze falling on the nightstand. The small, silver frame sat exactly where she'd left it, empty and gleaming. She had repossessed the one thing of true worth, the memory, and left me with its hollow, expensive shell. It wasn't just a photograph she'd taken. It was a final, devastating lesson in valuation. I had secured the cash, and she had seized the narrative. Standing there, surrounded by the spoils of a victory that had cost me everything, her last words hit me with the force of a market crash. "Thokal, you genuinely believe you've won," and for the first time, in the dead silence of my gilded cage, I knew I hadn't. So I have to ask, was I justified in secretly emptying our joint account? Or should I have confronted him the moment I found out?